Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 1992's Pet Sematary 2. Directed by Mary Lambert and starring Edward Furlong, Jason McGuire, Anthony Edwards, Jared Rushton, Lisa Waltz, and Clancy Brown. After a tragic accident on a Hollywood movie set, Jeff and his father Chase moved to Ludlow, Maine, the doomed location of the first pet cemetery. Chase sets up a veterinarian clinic while Jeff meets a new friend, Drew. Drew has his own struggles with a rigid stepfather named Gus, of whom was once in love with Jeff's mother and has a severe dislike for his stepson's beloved dog Zowie. History begins to repeat itself as Jeff and Drew take Zowie to the infamous pet cemetery, leading to a series of horrifying events in which all come to realize that sometimes dead is better. This follow-up to the successful adaptation of one of Stephen King's darkest novels is again directed by Mary Lambert and is a fresh continuation of the terrifying ideas presented in the first Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary 2 is for the horror fan that enjoys Stephen King-inspired suspense with 90s thrills and effects. Also joining me tonight is my fabulous co-host, Zena Dixon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog House. Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us tonight. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm doing great, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing well, thrilled, excited, super excited to talk tonight about Pet Sematary 2. As always, we'll get started with our no spoiler reviews and then jump into spoilers. I'll say right away, I get it. From a cinematic perspective, I do think that Pet Sematary is the better movie in terms of, the structure, the way it's set up. It's designed that way. But Pet Sematary 2 is hands down I prefer of the two. I love Pet Sematary 2. And there's a lot of reasons. I mean, it's got that early 90s feel. We've got Edward Furlong right on the heels of Terminator 2. Clancy Brown is in it, and his performance is
Yeah.
fantastic. And I love Clancy Brown. He was terrifying on this show that I used to love called Carnival, one of those shows that got canceled way too soon, but he was amazing in it. And I think maybe it's something to do with like the fact, like, I always compare it to like when people look at the Halloween series, they always say like they love Halloween 4 is one that gets revered and Halloween 5 kind of gets put to the side. Personally, I love Halloween 5 a little bit more. I get a little more excited to watch that one, even though Halloween 4, cinematically, structure-wise, is the better movie. And I think that's similar in this situation. I mean, the original Pet Sematary, you've got Denise Crosby, and very cool is that Mary Lambert directs them both. So I think that already has it going. But the reason why I bring up like Halloween 4 or this one, the thing I like about these kind of sequels or when it jumps in, the first movie, what makes it so good is the presentation of these ideas, the originality of it. But by the time we get the sequel, we can jump right in. They'll give us some broad strokes or a refreshing of like what's going on, but you can get right to it. You can get right to the point, to the fun, to the thrills, the gore, the excitement. And this one definitely starts off right off the bat. And it is a very different take on it. It's not just remaking Pet Sematary. But you could watch Pet Sematary 2 not having seen Pet Sematary. You don't feel like you're at all missing anything, but it's either, but you could also watch them both and get a different experience, even though there's similar threads. But anyway, I just highly recommend this movie. It's got everything that I know I love, and I'm pretty sure you love, which is that early 90s feel, the early 90s look, gore, effects, performances. This is an A+ movie for me, and I've gone back and watched it so many times. I saw it, my parents, when they were getting a divorce, was right when I saw this movie. So I had that connection with Drew and what he was going through with the Clancy Brown character when your parents are dating and the awkwardness of it. But although I looked a lot like Edward Furlong, as I was watching this movie, I'm like, gosh, I had the same haircut. Pretty sure I had the
Oh,
same jacket. I'm like, oh, that's very fun. But I think that there's a lot to enjoy because one thing that this one and the other one, the original, really do is focus on the family. And it's about loss and death, but it's really about the sort of dynamics of the family. And each one, from the first one to this one, you get like looks at three different kinds of families here. The original family, Jeff and his father, and Renee, as well as Drew, his mom Amanda, and Clancy Brown's character Gus. And I just think there's a lot of fun things to kind of examine and pick at through that movie. But anyway, I love it. Zena, what are your thoughts about it? How did you first come into it? What do you love about it?
Okay, well, first you pretty much said everything I wanted to say. But it's very similar. I watched I think I watched Pet Cemetery first, I really couldn't comprehend, what was going on. And then I remember watching this one and again, didn't really comprehend, but there was always something very unsettling with this one for me. It's kind of like what you said with the first one. It is a better movie. It's better made. The story has more structure. The way that emotional gut punch is just through and through. But there's something about this movie that I just cannot get enough of, and I find that I always need to go back as like a comfort type of watch to check it out. And I noticed like when I was like a teenager, this would just be one that I would prefer to watch over the first one, because the first one, those who know. I mean, clearly, I'm not gonna. If you haven't seen the movie by now, but I won't spoil it. But the thing is, you know what happens, right? And that to me, my heart cannot take that. With this, yes, something horrible happens, but it's through the lens of a young boy, and we witness him. He's very much in love with his mom. Like he loves his mom so much. You can see that. And you can see the scarring, and he just becomes so distant, and you want him to be better, and you can see that the dad is at a loss. He doesn't know what to do, so he does the best thing that he can. So I love the fact that, again, like we as the viewers, we watch this and it's through a child's perspective. Whereas with the other one, it felt very much adult-like, because we pretty much followed Lewis Creed a lot, which was cool. It was great. And of course, like I said, the gut punches throughout that film, cannot handle it, just being honest. But with this one, it feels 90s. It feels like fall. It just feels like a comfort type of movie. And like you said already, this is the kind of movie that you do not have to see the first one in order to know what's going on, because they kind of give you a little recap of what goes on. And then on top of that too, we'll get into more detail about it, but I absolutely love the main theme song in this, called Fading Away by Jane King. That it affects my soul, because it's just, just like I'm not trying to sound corny, the lyrics, but no, really, the lyrics just fit the movie so well, because for those of us who has experienced, loss, that song to me sums it up, because at this point, what can you do? Where can you go? You do feel lost, and it's just, this sounds like cheesy. Obviously, yes, it's a horror movie. It has like that cheese type of feel to it. But it's also a very just beautiful movie.
Me too. I couldn't agree more. I think it is a beautiful movie. And from here on out, spoilers for Pet Cemetery 2. And you make a good point. From here on out to spoilers for Pet Cemetery as well.
Yes.
We want to be able to speak freely about this movie, and you do need to kind of reference some of the original too. So spoilers, everybody. Go watch Pet Cemetery and part 2, come back, and then we'll go. But again, you can watch, like you said, Pet Cemetery 2, you can watch it without having seen the original. There's so much to unpack with what you just said. I will say too, I love the soundtrack of this movie. I love the soundtrack of the first one too. Obviously, director Mary Lambert had that background. I've watched a lot of interviews, or the special features on the Blu-rays and stuff, and she said that she was just finishing directing Madonna's Like a Prayer video when she did this, but she did a whole bunch of Madonna videos, a whole bunch of stuff. So her musical taste, and she wanted to actually do a little bit more with the soundtrack in terms of not alternative rock, heavy metal, a little bit more emphasis. It is a beautiful movie, and that's part of what makes it, though. You kind of get taken out of it with the music in a good way. So I really appreciate that she came from it from that aspect. But yeah, in terms of the original one, the thing that no other movie or sequel was ever going to be able to do was have the Gage scenario. I mean, it's truly sad. But one thing I do love about the original, as well as this movie, which the second one really amps it up, is the dark humor in it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's heartbreaking what happens to Gage, and when like Lewis is screaming, you feel it in your gut. I
Yeah.
recently showed a friend this for the first time, and she was devastated. But also, but when Gage, again, like we said, spoilers, so don't be shocked. When Gage comes back, there's something funny about it, but like that
Mm-hmm.
also is what makes it horrifying. The nervous laughter that we have because we know what we're seeing is funny, but it's horrifying. And I think that
Right.
this movie does that. It amps it up a little bit more. The whole Renee, when she comes back, everything with Gus, is so hilariously horrifying. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that about it. But yeah, he really does. The movie starts off Renee, it's a Hollywood set. So already too, I love that sort of meta feeling to it that we were going to see explored a little bit more in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, leading to the late 90s, Scream generation of films. But I like that we start off on this Hollywood set, which already shows you that there's going to be sort of this wink nudge thing. But it is horrifying to think that, Jeff, Edward Furlong's character, is seeing this happen to his mother, and he is really close. But I do love, because again, this movie is about the family, and I think he loves his father just as much, but he clearly is his mother's son. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it changes his dynamic with his father after losing it. But I really like that kind of take on the family and looking into it. And obviously that was explored heavily with Gage and Ellen Creed in the first one. And I like that they continue on with that.
I agree with you, especially with the soundtrack. I love that they use like songs that was unexpected, because that was not what happened with the first one, at all. But it's not a bad thing. I feel like sometimes too, I don't know about you, but I'll come across people where they're just so shocked when I say that I prefer this one, the second one, over the first one. I'm not saying that I think it's better. I'm just saying that, it's just like a preference. You just enjoy
Right.
watching it, right?
Right.
So as far as it goes with the family dynamic, I agree with you. I think that it's very interesting. Like, you can clearly see that Jeff is very close to his mother, and he probably had like an okay relationship with his dad. Like, he'd probably go see him in the summer, you know what I mean? Like, but they were fine. But now things have shifted. He has no choice. And, they're spending a lot of time together, but also he's trying to find his own path. Not trying to sound cheesy when people find your own path, but no, he's trying to find his own path after witnessing something so traumatic. You know, Obviously the dad, he doesn't know what to do with that, because I mean, to be honest with you, I probably would have seen if I could get the kid some counseling. Maybe he needs someone to talk to, and like the dad might be too close. So, but yeah, also too with the opening, when you mentioned that, I love the opening, because it starts off in this dark Gothic castle, and it's just like, oh, okay, so she's a star. And so it was unexpected. I don't remember the first time, like I said, when I watched it, how I felt. But just looking at it, it's just like, that's a nice start to the film. This is, I mean, it's not, but it is, as
Sure,
the
for sure.
viewers. But of course, you can like see like the shifting of between Jeff and his dad, and like they're trying to have a relationship, like a better relationship, and it seems like the dad is just trying to let him find his own path, which I think is great, instead of forcing him on some stuff. I did think it was funny with the housekeeper that he hired, with Jeff getting snippy with her, but she was getting a little bit out of control. Like, have just a little bit respect, girl, like, relax. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, well, and I forgot to mention this because you brought it up during the non-spoiler part, and it's the reason why we did choose to do this film at this time of year. It's November right now, and it is a very autumn-looking fall film, and I do love that about it. I love that it starts off very gothic, but the rest of the film is in the fall. I feel like the first one has more of a summer feel to it, a spring
Mm-hmm.
summer, which is very thematic to the movie. It's this young family that has everything ahead of them. They're in the early summer of their lives. This movie, Edward Furlong's character is being touched by some darkness, possible divorce, all his
Right.
mother and father. So we're already kind of in the fall, and it's a sequel. So just from a metaphoric way, it's the fall look of it really works for this film. And I do love that even though they're not filmed in the same place, because I think the original was filmed in Maine, this one I believe was filmed in Georgia. It looks though just like it. Like the path
Yes.
that they came up with, I thought was excellent. You could see them drive by the house and there's the little Creed mailbox. And again, because she was so famous, it works that they're not, even though Jeff and his father, Anthony Edwards' character, are new to this town, they're not learning the town because clearly they've been there before with the wife, with Renee, and the whole town knows who they are. You've got Jared Rushton, the bully, who I think does a terrific job.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I always loved him. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. So anytime I've seen him, but he always usually pops up as a bully, whether it's Lady in White or this one.
He has
And
that look.
yeah, he does. He really does. And I think he does a great job. But again, the whole look of the film is it has that fall feeling. It feels like autumn. It feels like it, which makes sense because we have Thanksgiving coming up. It's a, you know, a holiday people associate with family. So again, it makes sense that a movie sequel about a family is going to take place in the fall. But I would love to talk to you about the performances in general. I think Edward Furlong, you know, even though he's the lead of this film, I think Clancy Brown really steals the show.
Yes.
He does. But Edward Furlong is great. He had that very early 90s tortured look. Very authentic. I mean, that's how he was found for Terminator 2, was pretty much plucked off the street. And he is on the special features for the Blu-ray, and it's great because he doesn't give a lot of interviews. He, you know, he had some troubles, and you can see that darkness behind his eyes. It's easy to say that in hindsight, but that was the role he was playing, was these sort of off-kilter kids. These weren't the like necessarily good boy, you know. He, you know, they walked that middle line, and Jeff needs, the character of Jeff needs to have that, because he's, even though he's a good kid, he's going to end up making some bad choices because of that, you know. And especially with like his relationship with the housekeeper, who, by the way, yes, I think crosses the line a few times. I think when I was little, I was always like, oh, he's kind of mean to her for no reason. Watching as an adult, I'm like, it is a little weird that you're basically fangirling over their, you know, the dead wife and mother, and putting on the dress. I'd be mad too if I was Renee coming back and finding this woman going through my stuff. I'd be like, who do you think you are? Out, you know? So, and I think, again, the movie takes it in such a great way. But I do, you know, again, I think Edward Furlong is great. Anthony Edwards he was just about to do ER. He was up and coming, but he really has that authentic feel too, as a dad, a veterinarian. But yes, and I love Amanda, the character of Amanda and Drew. That's the part of the movie I love the most, and we'll get into it, is their whole family dynamic, the suspense that happens with them. But yes, Clancy Brown, from being the strict Gus for, you know, Drew, and always having the line of like, you're breaking the law, buddy, you're breaking the law, buddy. And it's so twisted, but I could feel a stepdad kind of saying that, and know how Drew feels as a kid. And but then when they, you know, when they do what they do with him, where, you know, he ends up being killed, they bring him back. That Gus is just as interesting a character, and Clancy Brown really, it could just be this zombie that's coming back, but Clancy Brown elevates it to another level. But what do you think about the performance? What are some of your favorites?
Well, first, we're going to start with Clancy Brown. I agree with you 100%. I feel like I've always liked the movie, but he's also one of my favorite things about the movie. And I feel like you can definitely agree with that. His performance before he's a zombie, you just hate him. You know, it's just like, kind of like what you said, oh, you know, breaking the law. And it's just kind of like, what I didn't get is why Drew's mom, I don't get why she would just sit back and let him talk crazy to him like that. And it's just like, okay, not in a rude way. You guys are forming a relationship. You're not his dad though. So maybe, like, I don't know, tone it down, you know, respectfully though, right? So I say all that just because it's just like, it was a little bit outrageous, but it's just like I mean, she was fine in the bedroom with him, but that's another story, right? And it's just, all right, whatever, girl. Anyway, I agree with you as far as it goes with his character. I love the character Gus, but you also kind of hate him. Then when he becomes a zombie, it's just like, oh, well, he seems pretty cool now, but he's dead, guys. So I don't know. I was waiting for that turning point, you know, because you know it's coming. He just was very much unhinged. So very much a standout. Then Edward Furlong's character, Jeff, I just feel really sorry for Jeff, you know, and I guess I feel like, yes, it was very dumb what he did, obviously bringing his mom back, because look at what happened to the dog. Look at what happened to Gus, you know? And it's just, I know that he didn't know, and he was just probably just so desperate just to have her back, you know? I get it, you know? Dead is better. You know, I had to get that in there. But yeah, those are just like the two standout performances from me. Like Edward Furlong, he was always just like such a cool looking kid, you know, where it's just like he fit it. He looked like very troubled, you know. In the beginning, he seemed carefree, everything's all good, and you know, he had a great relationship with his parents, even though separating. Then his whole world turned upside down, and he has to start a new school. And I don't know, I feel for him. You know, you feel for him. So it's just like kind of like you said, he plays. You could see it in his eyes, type of thing. So he always had like a good handle with that.
Well, I think it's no surprise that we find Gus and Jeff to be the most interesting characters because out of the whole cast, they have this very interesting link. I think Gus kind of looks at Jeff as the son that he always wanted, and Drew is not because Gus was in love with Renee. And I think that, you know, it's interesting because Jeff knows that Gus would be the father that would be willing to bring his mother back. He knows his father would not do it. And so they have this weird, you know, across the way connection. So the movie is really hinging upon these two characters. And if you like these two characters, you're going to really enjoy this movie. And I think it's this thing because that's what, you know, Gus is always looking at Drew as a disappointment or making, you know, and Clancy Brown said in an interview he always felt bad the things he had to say to, I think his name was Jason McGuire, the actor who played Drew, but he does say some things, but he also would play with him in terms of when the whole chase sequence would happen, which I think is just one of the great moments in horror films. And the way it just climaxes. But he told Jason McGuire, he's like, you better run. I am going to get you. If you don't run, I am going to get you. Could you just imagine Clancy Brown? I
would be so scared.
That, you know, at 12 years old, I'd be like, goodbye. But I just, and again, because, you know, Edward Furlong's acting, Clancy Brown is acting, I think Drew is authentic and does a great job. And that weights the movie down because, in a good way, like keeps it tethered because you believe these kids are friends, buddies, hanging out. They're both kind of the outcasts at their school. And but I love these two families are really connected by Gus and Jeff. And I think, like I said, you know, we'll get into it because I do want to hear what your favorite suspense moments are. But that whole climax from the moment it begins where Jeff is being attacked by Jared Rushton's character, but at this point, Clancy Brown has lost it. And there's an interesting like commentary in there about like what a great father he kind of is once he comes back. You know, Drew is finally, you know, I think Amanda, and it's all about love. And that's, you know, family, love. That's what this whole movie's about. What would we be willing to do for love? And I think that's why Amanda is so willing to stay. She is desperate for this love. She wants a father for him, but at the same time, everybody's wanting somebody to be somebody that they're not. She wants Gus to be this perfect father. He's a great lover for him or for her apparently, and he's a great sheriff. You know, he's got that authority. But as a dad, not so much. Drew, you know, he's overweight, but he loves his mom. His mom loves him. He's a good kid, you know, but he's not what Gus wants, and so forth and so forth. So I love that Drew catches him finally, like snapped, killed Jared Rushton. The whole chase sequence back to the house. Zowie has now joined Gus, running through the house. You have the little Jack Nicholson shining moment through the door, but this kid, he just leaps through the window. But the fact that, and then the mom trusts him. I love that the mom at this point, you know, there was no doubt. She's like, what is going on now? Like what? But but unfortunately, it doesn't work out. And then I'd say the other big moment too, I think people always react to is the sex scene with Anthony Edwards, and he's sleeping with Renee, and it's a very 90s booby shot. And then all of a sudden it's the dog, and the dog is there. But it's those little moments that make it interesting. There's also this great sequence where Jeff is like reaching out from the bed, and he's, you know, he's subconsciously dreaming about Zowie and his mother, which is obviously foreshadowing that he wants to bring his mother back. But it has these little moments. But what are some of your favorite like suspense moments and stuff like that?
Well, I agree with you with the chase between Drew and Gus. Love that scene so much. There was just so much potatoes. You know, I remember as a kid, I'm like, how, if potatoes fell on you, would you die? Like, I didn't understand, you know, whatever. Anyway, I like potatoes. That's a really good scene. I also love, this isn't violent really at all, but I love like the little Halloween scene at the campfire, you know, like they're having like a nice little, you know, campfire tale party, and you know, just like it was a good time until Gus ruined it, you know, and it's just kind of like, and once again, you know, Amanda, whatever. Anyway, I love that one. And I love when Jeff is headed to school, you know, on the first day, and he brings his little cat. I mean, I don't know why he brought the little cat, but
Right.
I guess he needed a friend, you know, so it's fine. But it's just like it just has like that. It has a '90s nice vibe to it that's just so like infectious. Like I just love it. And then I guess more you want more zombie killing stuff. I love the ending. Well, just before it ends, you know, when Jeff is reunited with his mom, and oh my God, that the love is there, and then you know, I love you more, and he opens up the door, bully right there, and then he's getting attacked, and his mom is laughing. So it's just kind of like,
Set
yeah,
it up.
you know, she pretty much set it up, and then when her face, when Renee, she just starts melting, and she's screaming, "Dead is better," and her voice is changed. That used to scare the crap out of me as a kid, in the best way
Absolutely.
though.
Absolutely. And you know, I love the Halloween sequence too, because I love that it's another chance for a recap. Like, I don't necessarily believe that's what happened. You know, Jared Rushton's story about what happened to Ellie Creed,
Hmm.
that she, you know, went crazy. But when rewatching the original, which I should say, I didn't see the original until, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Because again, I grew up with Pet Cemetery Two. I
Hmm.
just knew it. And then and again, I saw the original, and I'm like, yes, better movie, get it. But love this one. But I did really like the whole thing with Ellie Creed and the sort of psychic. I mean, Mary Lambert got the job because she said she really wanted to be as faithful as possible to Stephen King's work. Now he didn't release this one for a while. I mean, there were a lot of like rumors about it because he,
Hmm.
you know, that it was going to be one of his darkest novels, and it really is. But there were other reasons he didn't release it. But one thing, when he got final say on director, and he responded to Mary Lambert because she really wanted to stay to his tone or the story, and she did. And a lot of that comes out with like in the original, the zombie guy that's like giving them like advice the whole
Hmm.
time. The Ellie Creed. I
Pascal
mean, I've
or
read so many Stephen
yeah.
King novels and I love them. And but it's very much written or it plays like one of his novels. And this movie, it has that same kind of feel where you're going along. And I like to know, like during the Halloween scene, you know, I do want to know what happened to Ellie. But again, I could see that maybe that is what happened. She may have gone crazy if she's having
Hmm.
these visions and attacking her father, because you got to think it seems like the town kind of knows what happened to the wife, to Denise Crosby's character. They mention it very briefly in passing, but you know, there would have to be more to it unless Ellie did kind of go crazy. So, and
Hmm.
I love the Holly sequence, and you're right though, and that is the one scene with Amanda that I am disappointed because she knows what she's sending. She knows she went against Gus,
Hmm.
but now she's trying to deflect that, and she knows her son's going to get the
Right.
brunt of it, and that's the one time I am really disappointed in her.
Right. When Jeff first showed up at that party, you know, something that annoyed me was the fact that these bullies just keep on bullying him about his mom being dead. And it's just like, where do they do that at? Like, I'm not saying that they do that, but it's just kind of like that was just really cruel, you
Oh,
know? And
super
then
cool, yeah.
yeah, then the other thing is, did you hear how Mary Lambert, well, originally I heard that um she stated that she wanted to have like I was going to go in more detail where it was like this movie was supposed to be Ellie, or they had a movie in mind because I was even reading about it on like Wikipedia. They had a movie in mind where basically the original concept involved Ellie Creed, and basically she was like going to be like the central character, but then Paramount, they changed it because they weren't too sure about having like a teenage girl as the lead. They didn't know if people would watch it or not, and that's so unfortunate because I would love to see that version.
I would have loved to see that version. I haven't gone down the rabbit hole looking for this information, but I feel like yes, I have heard that either a commentary or interview. I would definitely have watched that movie. I think it would have been a
And
very cool movie because I think you do get attached to the character of Ellie, the little actress Blaise Bardal, or whatever. She went on to go do on
incredible.
Ghostwriter, which was one of my favorite shows as a kid. And but she was really good in it, and the character's interesting. You know, has this
Mhm.
interesting dynamic. But I'll tell you right now, boys are that cruel. Being a teenage boy, the things
Um,
I had heard said, you know, I would never have said anything that bad, but I know I probably said some stupid things in my
yeah.
time. But there are boys like that are definitely that cruel, and it's so
Oh, yeah.
unfortunate. It's out of
Yeah.
jealousy, it's out of spite, it's out of
Yeah.
ignorance, and you know, not realizing how lucky they are that they might still have their mothers, that this boy, it's really the suffering, yeah, that they have this ghost mother that like, you
Yeah.
know, swings down. boys are jerks.
Horrible.
But but yeah, going into the ending, which you touched on a little bit, I think that the movie comes together in a really great way. A lot of the themes, like we said, the whole Jeff and Gus kind of join together to bring Renee back. It is the most important part, which is really sad
Yeah.
for Amanda and Drew that Gus never could. That's why, he could never really love them because he was always in love with Renee. But for Jeff's sake, that works out. But from that moment, like in the graveyard, and again, I love the look of the first one. This one, the pet cemetery itself is amazing. It's appropriately creepy, but at the same time, you could understand why people would go there. And in the end, he brings her back. But yeah, I think it's very interesting that Renee ends up setting up Jeff. I don't think I realized that the first few times I watched it, but because she wants them to be dead now.
Yeah.
And what I like about Pet Sematary 2 as well is that they don't just repeat the same ideas. In the first one, Gage was automatically came back evil right away. Denise Crosby's character came back evil right away. But we're all different people. We all have different experiences. And Drew and Jeff kind of discuss this, like, it depends maybe who you were in life, how you come back. And Gus was kind of a jerk, so he kind of came back as this nice guy, but obviously as this devil in him. Renee, the same way, she's evil too, but I like that she didn't automatically come back and be evil. Like, there were these moments where she could interact. Basically what I'm saying is I know that there's people out there that are probably like, well, wait a minute, in the first one, they just came back evil. How did they kind of come back? You know what? It's a movie, it's a sequel. Not everybody's going to be the same. I kind of like that it's a little different. But yeah, the fact that she kind of ultimately sets Jeff up. But I love that despite the relationship, Jeff always loved his father. And I love that he ends up choosing his father. He chooses to live because I think that there's maybe a sort of like reference to like Jeff at that age of maybe taking his own life, or there's a sort of symbolism to that. And instead he chooses to kind of stay and let his mother go, because with death, that's the thing you have to do, is learn to say goodbye. And he wasn't able to do that. But overall, I think it's an excellent ending. I think it's an excellent movie. I love that they sort of give that in memoriam sort of, you see the pictures of everybody, and then the shot of the pet cemetery as it comes out, because there's something eerie about it that I just love. But what about you? What do you think? What do you think of the ending?
Well said with that, especially where it's just like it is learning how to say goodbye, and he just couldn't quite do that. I always thought, though, that no matter who you were, you would just come back evil. I just assumed that they were just pretending, especially in Gus's case, so he can get what he wanted. You know what I mean? And then even with the mom, like, she does want to be with them. Like, dead is better. So they'd rather have you dead, and
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then even with the bully and how they made sure to bury, Gus buried him, so it's just kind of like, I see what you're doing there. But yeah, honestly, I agree with everything that you said. Like, I just, again, I know it just sounds cheesy for a horror movie, but I just feel like it is just such a beautiful movie. Again, for those of us who has experienced loss, it is hard letting go. It is hard saying goodbye, but like you said, there was something about it where it's just, I don't know if it was supposed to be like he would have committed. You could feel it, because it's just kind of like, what was he supposed to do now? Like, he didn't know, and it's understandable. So just watch this movie at this point. If you sat through all this with the spoilers and for some reason you haven't seen it, just watch it. If you have seen it, just rewatch it again.
Agree. It's just a great 90s horror movie. It amps up the gore. This movie knows what a horror audience is going to want, the core audience. And I think that, if you're looking for a 90s movie, that you're a fan of Stephen King adaptations. Now, again, he didn't really have any involvement in this, but it is clearly based on his ideas, and he's one and only Stephen King. But you want something with a little bit of a gory thrill that has a little bit of heart to it, with the story, the characters, the performances, then definitely check out or recheck out Pet Sematary 2, because you will not be disappointed.
For sure. I would just recommend going in with an open mind with this movie, say if you are new to it, and just expect that it's going to be zany. And that's just pretty much, what it is.
Absolutely. Because not every movie needs to be, the best movie ever. So like you said, we both acknowledge, I think, that Pet Sematary, the original, is the quote-unquote better movie, but there's something about this one that I love a little more. I look forward to watching this one a little bit more. And yeah, very well said, Zena. I couldn't agree more. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog House. Are you a fan of Pet Sematary 2? Do you love the original Pet Sematary? What is your favorite Stephen King adaptation? As always, you can find Zena over at Wicked Horror or RealQueenofHorror.com or on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker. And I'm Justin. You can find me over at Wicked Horror, Horror One Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, for joining me tonight and talking about Pet Sematary 2. I'm so glad you love this movie because it's one of my favorites.
Thank you so much. Like we just have a bond because we both
really do. We really do. And thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.